Today's episode of Why Music Matters is sponsored by Buffalo Spree magazine. From the start, Buffalo Spree has been a champion of Western New York's arts community, with every issue showcasing the best of Western New York. What's on stage, on view, in the clubs, and in the concert halls. Pick up the latest issue to get a closer look, or visit buffalospree.com.
The message still matters.
Yeah.
Because our music was all about message as well as instrumental prowess. And and I think a lot of people, those very people got into it because they believed in the message we were trying to convey, and they still do.
Welcome to Why Music Matters, a podcast where we examine the power and influence that music can wield in our lives. I'm your host, Jeff Miers. Today, I'm joined by three musicians whose work has intrigued me for decades, from the first time I heard them while studying at the State University of New York at Fredonia in the late 80s. Ouch. Through to the present day. Ramsey, Lombardo and Jerry Augustyniak of 10,000 Maniacs are all significant names in the world of indie and alternative music, and were prime movers in the college radio-fueled alternative explosion of the late 80s and early 90s. Over the past few years, 10,000 Maniacs have been touring, playing a set list that covers 40 years of material, to an audience comprised of many people who have been following the band from the beginning. These days, some of those people are attending these concerts with their children, signifying the band's cross-generational appeal. The band plays its first Buffalo show in many years on Saturday, October 19th. When they return to the Center for the Arts on the University of Buffalo's North Campus at 8 p.m. Welcome to Why Music Matters. Ramsey, Lombardo, and Jerry Augustyniak of 10,000 Maniacs.
It's life that makes your soul forgive me. We see the love from the
So welcome, you guys.
How do you do?
It's wonderful to have you here and in this kind of cozy environment.
It's nice. It's nice and warm in here.
Yeah, beautiful. It is, as opposed to outside, 50-something.
Yeah.
Football weather.
It is football weather.
Actually, I've got my Sabres vintage cap on.
It's really cool. Did you guys see what Bob Dylan put on whatever it's called now? Twitter? Whatever. He who shall remain nameless.
He was in a hotel?
Yeah, he ran into somebody from the Sabres.
Well, they were staying in the same hotel just by coincidence.
There's two worlds I never saw colliding. That's kind of cool. Anyway, so, what we do with this podcast is try to get at, as the name implies, not just what you guys are up to, although I do want to talk about it, but why, all of us have kind of chosen this life and why we think it continues to matter. it seemed like a good place to start is you've been on the road a lot over the past couple years. The 40 years tour. This is ongoing now, starting again at UB Center for the Arts on the 19th, which we're psyched about.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, what have you noted in the audience? Why do you think your music continues to matter to them? Because it clearly does. What have you noted out on the road? Any of you who want to talk about it?
Oh,
Well, I think I go to see a lot of concerts. as you well
I see
know.
you at many of them.
And it's real strange that like a lot of groups that are really trying to go into new ground.
Yeah.
They're lucky if their friends and their family turn up. Do you know what I mean? It's unfortunate, but it's not like the old days where people were really excited about seeing a fresh new group. Whereas now some of the most popular groups are the ones who really bring people back to their memories of their 20s and 30s, And like when we played with 10,000 Maniacs, we've been, doing it for 40 years. So a lot of our fans, they get reminded of when they were 20 and when they had their certain fashion and stuff, or sometimes a bunch of women, because we have a lot of female fans, and sometimes they'll book a table, there'll be 6, girlfriends that are like leading regular lives, children and stuff, but it's their night out. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they like to hear the songs from their youth. And so I think that's why we've endured, because,
and the message still matters.
Yeah.
Because our music was all about message as well as instrumental prowess. And and I think a lot of people, those very people got into it because they believed in the message we were trying to convey, and they still do.
Yeah.
And I mean, take a look at the world around you, So
it's the
a lot of
power.
them feel sometimes maybe you need to cling to this message from
Yeah, there is the message, and there's the power of nostalgia, the power of the senses, the being in a place where you're hearing something from the past, so you're transported. But it's also having a place where people can gather instead of being isolated. They're with their friends, as John was saying, family members. There's some of the fans that have brought their kids that are now adults. And a lot of the places we've played have been places where, like city wineries across the country, you can get a meal and the music in one spot, and
and you can sit down.
Yes, you can sit down,
which is tantamount for our crowd.
Well, we have a show coming up in Solana Beach, which is just outside San Diego. It's a very popular club. And it's one of the
Belly Up.
Belly Up.
Oh, yeah.
And it's one of the few places where people stand, and it's kind of like the old days. And you really feed off of a different energy when people are standing there as opposed to just sitting there.
Does it change the gig?
What's that?
Does it change the gig?
It does. It changes even sometimes the composition of the set.
Well, there's a sense of more of an informal setting when it's seemingly when they're standing up, because there's a proper feeling when there are many different venues we play. When we're playing like a place like UB will be playing, there's a more formality because there's orchestras there. I saw Margaret Atwood there a few years ago. They've got this venue that can work with different acts.
Definitely.
And that works very nicely because it's a big listening room. But we've played all sorts of different places, and the standing rooms, like for example, we played in San Francisco and we were in this club where everybody, they were smoking so much pot. I got high on stage, contact high.
You had one of your funniest ad-lib lines when as soon as we started playing, it seemed like everybody lit up a joint at the very same time when we started. And it was overwhelming. And Mary ad-lib, she said something to the effect of, whoa, that's a pretty strong smell. I don't know what it is, but my cramps are gone.
Yeah. Back when I had cramps.
It worked.
Yeah.
Do you have a preference between the two, though?
Oh, it's definitely a different energy when people stand, and maybe people are a little younger, maybe not. But yeah, you feel a sit-down audience there's sort of a formality to it. And
it makes it exciting.
But sometimes you don't know because you can't read a sit-down audience as well. You know what I mean? And you think, oh, maybe this isn't going over very well. And then at the end of the night, they go crazy and they get up and they were enjoying it all along. And I know personally, I sit there watching bands and I don't get up and dance and boogie and
Well, you never did.
No, I never did. And but it doesn't mean
as long as I've known you, I've never seen that.
Maybe at the back of Nietzsche's years ago.
But it is interesting though because we also play some of these like city festivals and stuff where there'll be like 2 or 3 somewhat famous groups and then like a bunch of local groups, and they're it's called soft tickets. So in other words, you're getting a lot of people checking you out who really aren't your fan base, and they don't know much about you too much, and we still do those. So and that has a different energy altogether.
Definitely.
But we also do there might be soft ticket or sort of smaller towns and stuff where we are sort of written as a headliner, and people do come to see us at those situations, and sometimes it's really great. It's a couple places we played. It was a beautiful sunset. It's sort of an outdoor scenario where people are bringing their kids. You have kids running around, and there's vendors, and those are really nice.
Like a town celebration, really, a festival.
Right. So it's kind of hard to say that one's better, one's more of a favorite than the others. Maybe there's a green room that has some more of the M&Ms that I like than another one, but
better charcuterie.
Yes, But for the most part, it's always a thrill, and everywhere we play, so it's always an adventure because our act is being put into a different environment, so it's going to. There are some things we can control, which we have a great sound person, and we have other people lighting
that consistency.
And I think every group has to do that to keep the consistency.
Well, it's also interesting too when you meet the people after the show and you talk, and some of them have driven a long way to see you. You're playing like some little town in, say, New Hampshire or something, and you think, well, everyone here is from New Hampshire. And then someone says, oh, we drove down from Montreal. Or we drove, from some Ottawa or something like that. And it's really flattering because, you don't really know that when you're looking into the crowd. And that's why I think it's important for any group, even if you're playing at a local place here in town where there's not many people in the crowd, you still have to give 100%. You can't just, slag off a little bit because you're disappointed at the turnout.
Well, I don't think anybody, for the most part, anybody on stage doesn't give 100% because the stage creates this energy that makes you feel you want to give.
I see some groups that go through the motions because they're kind of disappointed in the turnout. But you can't hold it against the people that came
because this could be their one night when they needed it more than anything else. They might have driven a long way. Yeah, John, you talked about nostalgia in a way. So often that word has negative or can have negative connotations. I don't think that it necessarily needs to. But nostalgia, when it comes to this incredible body of work that you guys get to, curate a different set list from every night, that suggests to me that it's not just nostalgia or wanting something that was.
No, I think a better term might be stirring memories.
Stirring memories are also
certain
taking them into the present too, though.
Yeah.
Because anytime you're interacting in the now.
And we have so many people in our audience that really became fans of our group when they were in college.
Yeah.
We were always like on college radio, and the rise to popularity was through that great structure of college radio. And so a lot of the people that are coming there are sort of the same age and experience that world. You know, that world of punk meets new wave, just meets emotional music. Lilith Fair, you know, that whole world that really doesn't exist now as much as it did. And I think that by stirring the memories of those people, you're using the music to do it, but it takes them right back to that place. Just like a person who's sitting there listening to Ramblin' Gamblin' Man by Bob Seger, takes them back to a high school dance, you know, and you're right there again.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a time machine, really.
A time machine. I like that.
I said that earlier, though. You took
he's stealing your lines.
Yeah, I was talking about your nice set over here as a time machine with the drums. That's okay. Yeah.
I don't really see the metaphor.
It's the TARDIS is what that is.
That's the TARDIS. You get in there and you go wherever you want.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of kind of your, you know, a listener's first relationship with the music, my personal one with the band was right when I got to Fredonia and I was hearing, you know, recordings that were made where I was going to school.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of blew my mind. And I formed a deep relationship with the music that has totally endured. But it was also interesting how, I don't know, in some way we felt like you were sort of our band. Does that make any sense? And did some of these initial, Mary, I know you weren't there.
I was actually at Fredonia, but I was practicing viola.
At the same time that this was going on? What time?
Like I was there 81 to 80. Well, 81 to 91. No, I was supposed to leave, but it took me.
I didn't want to leave there either.
Well, it took me 10 years to get my degree. I had to go out and
work in between.
Yeah, do some stuff. But I was there in the music department when stuff was going on with the group. I just wasn't really paying attention to it.
That's cool.
I was impressed by just a state school like that having such a comprehensive music recording program.
Yeah.
I've never seen anything like that before.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Me too.
And I
had just joined the band at this point, I think. Is that correct?
Pretty much 83.
Okay. Yeah,
they'd already did one. They did an EP.
You came in for the full length.
But when you joined the group, right, Jared, weren't you? We went right to the studio.
Pretty much.
Before we had
gigs. You know, maybe 10 days of rehearsal. And I was like, okay, we're going to record a record. And then they had a very clear-cut vision of what they wanted to do. We're going to make a record. We're going to print up X amount of this records. We're going to give half to college radio stations. We're going to sell the other half out of the back of our truck, and we're going to drive around the country. And this is what we're going to do. And it's like,
when that record was.
Well, that was Secrets of the I Ching.
Yeah, that was
February 1983. I think that's when we recorded that.
Did that kind of environment have any effect on? I mean, it feels like this was a time when the band's kind of vision for what it was going to become was crystallizing in a way. I was not there among you at the time, but I'm kind of putting that together. Did that environment have any effect? I know you're probably recording like whenever you could get time because the students were using it, right?
Well, I got to give credit to Fredonia. It was a very special place in the sense that it was very unified in terms of like just appreciation for the arts.
Yeah.
I went to another state school years before at Geneseo.
Yeah.
We had nothing like this. I mean, we had like 2 bands and they were mostly, you know, doing covers. But you get to Fredonia and, you know, there were people from film department who wanted to, you know, see if they could film our rehearsals or other bands, you know, would want to open for us or, you know, we'd stay with them. There was a real community sense in Fredonia. And the DJs, like, you know, the clubs downtown, they hired
Old Main Inn, etc.
They hired guys like, you know, Dave Kettle, EVR, and Mike Moran, who really were who were really interested in the music. They weren't just playing, you know, the hits of the day.
Exactly.
They were really searching for a new thing, and Fredonia was the perfect thing for us, and we very much look back on it with a great love.
And it was part of the zeitgeist of, college radio. That seemed to be the heyday to where, we could be in an original band and just try and get on college radio, and we kind of rode that wave, and
it was just happening at that time, really.
And we were there really being exposed to the greatest bands from around the world. We were listening to The Clash and Joy Division and Television and Talking Heads, and then the emergence of reggae and ska music, which permeated that whole scene with the Specials and
and was influencing bands like The Clash very obviously.
Yeah. Whereas I think that that didn't exist in all parts of this country. You know what I mean? Not to the extent it did around here.
In the Northeast, really?
Yeah.
When did you go to, you were in Geneseo when? What was
from 70 to 74.
Yeah. Because that scene didn't really develop.
And I worked at the radio station too, but I was the only one, I think, that was playing unusual music. Everybody else was playing Grateful Dead, Allman Brothers, the same thing that's very popular now. But I was playing, Van de Graaff Generator and unusual stuff. Even Bowie in those days, which I was playing a lot.
I think, weren't you also doing like British Isles?
I was playing Fairport Convention.
That's always been
Drake,
a thing for you. Yeah.
And Sandy Denny and all that. Lindisfarne was another big favorite.
Shirley Collins.
Do you think it's clear that, college radio gave you guys an awful lot of opportunities that don't really exist now? Can you talk about, when you observe kind of what's going on now and whatever the music industry actually is, and you compare it and contrast to when, you could hear the Ramrods and 10,000 Maniacs on WBNY or, next to each other.
The Stains,
exactly. Shout out to Jerry and the Stains.
That's how Jerry came to be in our group after us seeing him play in that group, and,
in Buffalo.
Yeah, we got to have this guy.
They opened for us.
Yeah.
How cool.
At the Schuber House. And I just remember being blown away at the sound coming off the stage with your tiny little PA, and it was like, wow, there's just this real fullness. It was like a music box. I was thoroughly impressed. Great drummer, too, Jim Fody.
Well, at the time, there was a big division because there was this sort of new wave movement going on, but there was also the remnants of disco music. We're talking about in the 80s, there were places like Mean Guys East and stuff with some of these bands that were basically doing, play that funky music, White Boy. And
so it's a disco hangover still into the early 80s. Yeah.
And then Club 747, right?
Yeah.
It was always a cover band regime.
Yeah.
It's always that.
I mean, nothing really changes, I guess.
In fact, there was a real divide between groups that could play in the city and groups that could play in the suburbs. Very rarely, although there was that what was the place where like the Police played? And,
you're talking Uncle Sam's.
Uncle Sam's.
That was an actual venue.
But how about the place that was on Main Street though, where I saw like the Vapors? Did you guys open for the Vapors?
That was Harvey and Corky.
Yeah,
Stage one.
Stage one.
Stage one.
Legend. I didn't get here until 1990, so I missed all this.
And the Police were there in a rented station wagon, loading up their own gear.
Yeah, playing in front
on a
of
Sunday night.
10 people.
On a winter Sunday night.
Wow.
It's wild.
Do you feel like bands that were, let's say occupying the same kind of independent spirit that 10,000 Maniacs has always had, are they at a disadvantage now without any kind of infrastructure like that?
Well, define infrastructure.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it was very loose, right? It's not like anyone was getting rich, but your music could be heard, and you'd get to a different town, and people might know you.
Look at the technological revolution now.
Sure.
Some of these groups are like world famous, and they've never even been inside of a real studio. They record at home, and so in other words, they get a leg up because if for some reason you can connect like a Billie Eilish or something like that, she was already famous before she was famous.
Yeah.
They had like 100,000 people on, what, I don't even know what the formats are, but.
Well, there's so much information now you can get. And I always think that like when we were young, there's always this kind of magic that the older people didn't know. Like it's no matter what, the youthful, when you're in the youthful position of your life, you've got these kind of ways that the older people don't know about and vice versa. Well, sort of. The younger people aren't that interested in what older people are doing. But I really think there's stuff going on, and it might be that we don't have the portal because we don't have the key to go into that because of our age. But also, I do think that there is a lot of communication to what's cutting edge, and we just might not know what it is.
Yeah,
I probably don't. But your son is
completely in that world, and that's helped me because I've learned a lot through him.
Right, because there's this other.
So there is a portal, but I understand what you mean. There might not be.
Yeah. It seems to me that God, this is whereas before you had. Say like a TV show like Ed Sullivan or something,
right.
But
everyone saw the Beatles.
We're not that old. But you had a situation where you had millions of people looking at the same thing at the exact same time, like the world's biggest sporting event or something.
Exactly.
Whereas now it seems, I don't know. To me, you really have to search out what in terms of things. Things just seem kind of compartmentalized.
Yeah.
Well, you also can create your own world with your YouTube presence. You know what I mean? Yeah. Whereas in the old days, you talked about Ed Sullivan. When the Doors came on, you not only were you seeing them for the first time, but you had to like defend them against your parents.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Even
and the Beatles.
And the Beatles and all of those groups.
Look at their hair. Oh, no.
Yeah, and there's a lot of fractioning of information, like the whole thing about the Instagram Reels and everything like that. Yeah. Getting the information, it's very interesting, but it's randomly coming to you like this, a ping pong, or not ping pong, but like a pinball game. So you don't know what's going to come out
But you choose your little...
But I think that's one of the other reasons people like to go to live music. For the most part, they're not going to be looking at something else, hopefully. They're going to be mesmerized and given their undivided attention to what is right in front of them.
That's what I was trying to get at. Yeah,
and not necessarily something that they planned on going to. They, hey, this is pleasantly surprising. You know what I'm saying? Having something wash over whereas I find a lot of situations where you really have to seek out. And chances are you already know what that particular thing you're seeking out is all about. Mm-hmm. Whereas, and I know there's situations where they'll say, well, if you like this, you'll probably like this,
right.
Spotify and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But
well, it's a live concert and anything can happen there. That's what I think is great about having shows. I mean, it can be a little bit scary being on the stage and having unpredictable things happen, but also. That's what makes it fascinating to go and see concerts and have the possibility of hearing something you've never heard before.
Well,
or a song that's done a little bit differently.
Yeah, I also think though, with all the variety that we are, privileged to have, so many groups don't take advantage of that variety. Like for example, our group, we were influenced by things like The Clash and stuff, but also some of our songs were very much reminiscent of, say, the British folk style. But yet we'd come around with like My Mother the War or Death of Manolete, which was like Jesus and Mary Chain or something like that. The same group could go from one to another. Whereas a lot of groups I see now, they come out, okay, I get it. You're cowpunk.
Right.
And every song is cowpunk or every song is whatever the genre is, and groups I don't think are as adventurous as in our era.
You can pat us on the back for that because that was always that was what we were all about, man. We could take kind of any style we chose and it put it into the blender and it would sound like us. But because we're pretty disparate people in terms of Deadheads. I like kind of heavier rock things, folk. We somehow it all got tossed into the Cuisinart, and it turned into us. So I'm proud of that.
Yeah, well, it's honest, and I think that's what that indie spirit, that whatever you want to call it, alternative music. All these labels are somewhat unfortunate, but we kind of get the idea of what we're talking about.
Yeah, there's something like, it's like, not Catch Me If You Can, but it's almost like it can't be, it's something out there that is like you're trying to catch a butterfly or something, not to sound corny, and you just can't, you just don't. I mean, you might be able to, but that there's a spirit that is not to be pinned down or labeled, that it can always change a little bit. And that's what I hope that our music does at our shows, that we're playing we're playing music from different eras, but there's the live show you get is going to be something that is live.
I mean, in a way it's almost,
if we're still alive,
but it's also kind of spiritually uplifting.
Today's episode of Why Music Matters is sponsored by Buffalo Spree magazine. From the start, Buffalo Spree has been a champion of Western New York's arts community, with every issue showcasing the best of Western New York. What's on stage, on view, in the clubs, and in the concert halls. Pick up the latest issue to get a closer look, or visit buffalospree.com. Yeah, I wanted to talk about that because Jerry did mention the message is something that people, and it's not like every tune had the same message or anything like that, but it was thoughtful, always, whether we're talking, you name an album, but, Love Among the Ruins, anything. It always had, to me, this sort of thoughtfulness. There's like a sense of compassion in it, and a sense of narrative that you were telling stories that, I don't know, that kind of united
mortality too.
Yeah, there was melancholy, right? But it was never morose. It wasn't Robert Smith, right?
But there was a sense of finding emotions within you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
that aren't just like sex and drugs and rock and roll, which a lot of groups still champion. At the time, there were groups like the Cramps and stuff that were kind of in the same world as us, but they weren't in the same world. So different, but, played in the same venues, Maxwell's or something, or wherever the places were in New York.
Well, it's like television playing with the Ramones. I mean, ostensibly the same audience, I guess, but musically.
But I also have to say that
see that more.
It was a new time of seeing women confronting bands at that time and telling stories, and their presence being very important.
Well, I also think
that's a huge factor.
Up to that point, a lot of women that were fronted bands were either like this really beautiful girl, that like everyone, just lusted after, or it was a tough girl who wanted to prove that she could party with the guys in the band, So on one hand, you had Deborah Harry, and on the other hand, you had like Patti Smith or Joan Jett, or
in the rock world,
or even Chrissy
in the rock world. Yeah.
Whereas we suddenly kind of emerged with a female presence, but not trying to be one of the, that could party with the guys, or that could come out just dressed as sexually provocative as possible. It was just like a real person.
As part of the band. Part of the creative unit.
Yeah.
And,
But definitely a female energy coming through.
Like, but Sarah McLachlan, and thinking of other people that were from that time period. There are a lot of women.
Even when you had groups like Tina Weymouth, who was the bass player of Talking Heads, she wasn't really a front person, but she was equally accepted as a musician.
Don't take her out of the band. It doesn't sound.
No, it never sounded
so different.
And there was that kind of evolution that was going on anyway, where there was like this more, I don't know, what is the word I'm thinking of? Almost genderless kind of thing that was starting to happen, like with, when you see people like David Bowie that was doing the androgynous stuff, and then there were men and women during that early time, the women's would look just more manly, like, there'd be this kind of different, even Brian Ferry, of course, he had the suits, and there's that kind of the style going along with fashion. Whereas, now, fashion and music seem to go very much together, but it's the big name fashion designers with this, as opposed to back then, it was people just being quirky and coming up with these,
who they were and kind of doing it themselves.
Bringing that into the mix, which I think was interesting, and not sexualizing women so much as
it was
listening to their voice. Yeah. Not that there's anything wrong with a beautiful, sexy woman wanting to do that, wanting to appear that way too.
Well, you mentioned, somebody mentioned Talking Heads.
Yeah.
I just envisioned that group just coming together on sort of equal footing. It was like four students who got together.
That's exactly what it was.
There wasn't any like preconceived, okay, this is going to be the front person, this is going to be, the female. And I think a lot of bands kind of got together, kind of stumbled.
But there comes a different energy that goes into the music, as opposed to something where, like Manowar, something, where there's this almost primal.
Shout out Joe Rosler.
Yeah, Joe Rosler, we love you. So it's interesting, just all the different varieties of expression. I sometimes wonder why have men always wanted to be in rock and roll? Because there's for me being a female, there's such a femininity to music.
Absolutely.
When I perceive it, but men find their identity, their machismo in music, too.
You also find, I think, that you're really getting in touch with the other side of yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, there's that macho side of it, and sort of absurd and silly David Lee Roth kind of thing going on, or whatever it is, which can be amusing. Doesn't look so good when you're, 60.
70 years old.
Yeah, 70, So I think artists that endure, male artists that endure too, have to be in touch with that side of wherever the muse comes from. I don't think it's really toxic masculinity that brings you the muse, know?
Well, like you were saying, Bob Dylan being in was it Prague with the Buffalo Sabres there, and he made a mention of Buffalo. He's a long-lasting artist because his identity has always been the songwriter and his songs and his uniqueness.
Yeah,
and that's a lot of it. And I think that this band has always been unique.
I think so too, and that's why I asked at the beginning, like, when you're seeing people who maybe have been here for the whole ride coming to this show, do you get that sense? Because being on the other side of the stage and witnessing it, I feel that. I'm like, this is something that I tapped into young, but has continued to grow with me. It's not like I'm like, oh, I'm pretending it's 1986 and I just got to Fredonia when I listened to you. I'm...
As long as we can kind of age well.
Yeah.
That's as long as we don't look silly doing what we're doing. But I don't think that's the case with us. Like, as opposed to some heavy rock.
Sure, and you have to wear the silly outfit or whatever.
And the spandex with the truss.
Well, and you also, a lot of groups find themselves pigeonholed lyrically.
Yeah, you're stuck there, right?
There's this world view. And if I hear one more song with I'm down to my last cigarette, or all right, is that something you really have to share with us, or like, I have to have one more bottle before I go home. A lot of country music, I think. I like a lot of country music,
sure,
but there's certain parameters, that you have. That's why something like Ode to Billy Joe or something shook people up, because no one expected, a little mystery song wrapped in the guise of a country song.
And that endures. It still sounds otherworldly to me.
Yeah.
No, there's songs.
Those those are like precious jewels, man.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, people have stylistic things that they lean on, and lyrical things that they lean on, and that's why they call it a genre, in a sense. But
we've never, in a way, we've never really said, well, we can't you have this set of lyrics because we've never sung about that topic before.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, we have songs about surrealistic painters like Poor de Cherico, and we have songs about, child abuse. What's the matter here?
And
we have songs about,
and that's
spring
what
mornings.
That's what makes us great.
Winter storm.
I think so. I agree with you, Jerry. Yeah, it's all in there.
Yeah.
If you don't mind talking about it at all, through all the things that have happened, I feel like the sort of spirit of Rob Buck remains in the music. And I don't think I've ever talked to you about if you feel that way, all three of you. But B, like, could you pinpoint what that magic was? There was something unusual enough there in that even without his physical presence, it seems to just be there when you play.
Yeah. Leave it to him to make a riff out of the open B and the open E string at the top of his guitar.
Yeah.
And that's one of my favorite riffs, man. Great Victory.
Oh, B-D, 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 B.
It's super cool.
It's completely memorable.
Me too. In fact, not bragging, but I gave him songwriting credit just because of that dee-dee, dee-dee, dee-dee. Everything else was composed.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's also interesting, the thing about Rob and the thing about our band, which has to do with like a lot of other groups, is a group is always the sum of its parts. Do you know what I mean? And sometimes it's that chemical combination of people. I've heard Joe Strummer talk about this. Take a group like The Clash. If those four guys had never met each other, I don't think they would have been nearly as successful. Because they each had a talent which was very unique to the other ones, Whereas, and we were kind of like that too, in a sense.
Yeah.
And Rob, as great as he was, and he defined our sound, definitely, but it was the juxtaposition of his unusual approach to soundscapes combined with songs that were kind of structured in a different way. You know what I mean? He could have, like, say he had been in a group like, say, King Crimson or something like that. It would have been very different than to have that kind of floating thing in a song about, retiring people and, and the sadness of families breaking apart.
Yeah.
It was that weird juxtaposition.
Yeah, Tension. That's another, what he did in Tension, the things he did with his volume pedal and those kinds of sounds, they lend themselves. There's a real sort of ghostly quality to it.
Yeah,
it lends itself to the lyrics.
And he was, his
sorry.
presence when he would perform. He was very unusual presence. He was a guy that he was kind of like, I always think of him as the lion from the Wizard of Oz, kind of that kind of presence of a kind of shucks, but also just quirky and
like a mad scientist.
Yeah.
In a way, in fact, other guitar players.
He wouldn't say a lot.
No, but other guitar players will often acknowledge that they have no idea how he got some of his sounds. And he used alternate tunings, but he also used very unusual old school effects in a way that only he could understand. And then when he was gone, it was very difficult for us to even replicate some of his.
But
things.
he wasn't like somebody who was like a guitar player that's very into everything and they talk about what they're doing and because it is very exciting. It's but he kind of just stand back like an old grandpa, quiet old grandpa and just. I got that, just not really make a big deal out of anything.
That's really cool. But the subtlety of what he brought to it.
Sometimes he would present a song and you'd say, Rob, what key are you? What key is that? He goes, I don't know. He would just play along. I mean, there was more to it than that.
Yeah.
But it was very unusual because he didn't view it from the technical point of view that like a guy from like Berkeley or some of those guys, that were really grounded in theory.
Right.
Rob wasn't really that person at all.
Also, although some of his open tunings were based on certain things like Hawaiian. I think one was, they called it Hawaiian slack
key guitar. Yeah.
And I don't know which song. I don't know if it's Kerouac that he uses that tuning. I don't know if it's These Are Days, but one of those is based on that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true, Jeff. That you bring up his presence being always on stage with us.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, no, we were, like when Jeff Erickson joined the band, we were actually pretty lucky that we were able to find Rob's notes as far as how to tune these guitars, because we were kind of for a while there.
The secret sauce.
Yeah, it's not quite sounding the way it's. I mean, you get a couple strings that could be act as drone strings or something like that, and it gives it that other dimension. And it's like, well, this thing, luckily we were able to find his notes, to
paper notes.
Yeah, well, we were also very fortunate to come of age when we did, when record companies gave bands a little bit more freedom to be themselves.
Yes.
Where they wouldn't necessarily, now today, even if you get, I don't even know if record companies really exist anymore, but I mean, they'll bring in a producer who will basically redefine your sound. I mean, in a way, we did demos with Eddie Kramer at one point, and he kind of, we're arguing with him, and here's the guy who produced Jimi Hendrix and Abbey Road records and things like that, and we're telling him, no, this is the way we want to do it. But he imposed upon us a certain discipline which we had never experienced up to that point. Before it was always like, yeah, man, do it. Even Joe Boyd, who we love, he always said, I don't really want to change a band. He goes, I only work with bands that I already like. And I just want, it's my role to bring out the best in what they already do and not change them. And I've always embraced that. And I always thought that was a great thing and you can tell that in Joe's music.
Yeah.
Arnold Lane does not sound like Five Leaves Left.
No.
And he's the same guy, or the McGarrigle sisters,
Some of the greatest.
He does all of that. Yeah.
Arnold Lane doesn't sound like Dark Side of the Moon.
No, it certainly doesn't, does it? Things evolve and change. Could I ask you how much of you talked about feeling lucky to come of age at a time when you did. How much of this had to do with Jamestown itself? I mean, could the early versions of the band have come from anywhere else? Was there something particular about that?
I don't think so. I don't. It would have been a different vibe if we came from New York City or something. I mean, no. I think Jamestown really lent itself to, for various reasons, the fact that these guys had to play the bars that they played in, which really. But John would probably know more.
Well, I could also interject a little bit, is that I would also say almost like a Western New York sound.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that it's very agriculture outside of the cities. So we've got the grapes and you've got four seasons, of course, but you've got the elements of nature that I think are inspirational, a lot of 10,000 Maniacs music. And then you've got the little stories that, quirky stories that come out of living in smaller towns, being able to observe them.
There was also something very
afar.
spooky about our area, you know.
Yeah,
it was
Lilydale.
having Lilydale
Yeah.
there, and like just stories of like the old amusement parks, you know, that were destroyed by tornado. And the other thing is too, there was some pretty good music that we were exposed to. There was a lot of really good bluegrass music in Jamestown. So, you know, Rob was, you know, when we said, well, let's maybe try some acoustic instruments, he pulled out a mandolin and he could just play it. I don't know. He had never even said he knew how to play the mandolin. And when we did that first record, you know, Dennis got an accordion, I got a 12-string, and Rob pulled out the mandolin, and that was the basis of 2 or 3 songs. And it just came out of nowhere, but it was because we had been listening to that music for a while. But there's another thing too about being in a small town. Like if you live in Buffalo and you have a band rehearsal that goes bad, you know, there's a big argument.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you say, let's just get rid of this guy because I know 4 other bass players that we can try out, or, you know, so there's a little bit more fluidity, whereas we were kind of stuck there. And while there were some other musicians, they weren't into what we were into. There wasn't any other guitar player in Jamestown who knew what Gang of 4 sounded like, or who knew, you know, what.
So you guys were it.
I don't know who said it in the band. I don't know if it was John or Dennis, or he said, you know, in regards to Jamestown, the only way there was going to be a scene here is if we created the scene. And that's kind of it. I mean, any kind of quirky music was filtered through these guys, you know, and because of that, there was just a different take on it, as opposed to, you know, definitely New York and you know, and to a lesser extent Buffalo, you know. You know, these guys were the scene.
Well, that's one of the things I've always admired about you two. Those 4 fellas started playing together when they were 14.
Yeah.
From the same town.
Yep.
Never
same
played
school
with anybody else.
Nope.
You know, and I think that's really something to speak of. And not many groups can say that. And I mean, just the fact that Jerry, you know, is joined us from another place, but the rest of us, there's a sort of
and when you were already in a
sense.
band in Buffalo, you're probably in a few bands in Buffalo.
Well, I was in that.
But they weren't all from the same town. I mean, Patrick was from Syracuse.
Yeah. But us, you know, they
you were a Buffalo band,
but you know, they were college students.
But we were all from Jamestown. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And
and you created, and everything kind of filtered through you guys in terms of, you know, what music in New York is supposed to sound like, or whatever, and things get a little kind of going through that filter. They get turned on their heads, and just, you know, you know, the way this band sounded, and is because of, in a way, because of what they said. This is what new wave music is supposed to sound like, but it was never going to sound like new wave music in New York. It was never going to sound, you know, or LA or anything. It was the filter, you know.
There's a lot of that music too that we were.
That's cool.
In that world, it was very gimmicky.
Yeah.
You know, turning things that turn, you know, like little silly songs.
The other thing is that you got to have, like, you have to be a person that, and especially at that time, it was easier to feel a lot of positive identity, like saying, I want to try this. It's really different from going the usual path of getting a job and doing this and that.
Yeah.
Like for me, I had studied classical at Fredonia. I'd studied viola. And I was doing that stuff. And then I moved to Buffalo, didn't finish my degree. And I was just totally wowed by, like, wow, this is a big city, first of all. And then there's all this music, other kind of music going on. I first worked with, hooked up with David Kane and them Jazz Beards. And I thought, this is really neat. I can play my viola a different way, because I wasn't really into classical music, really. And then then I met John at Nietzsche's. Michael Meldrum was doing his
Songwriters Night.
Yeah, Greenwich Village project.
Yeah.
But for me, and John and I got into doing that. But what I remember is the spirit of like, we were talking about this the other day. Like, we didn't really ever think about money. You know, it wasn't about money really, at least for some of us.
Mm-hmm.
It was more like, I'm doing what I want to do, and I'm getting attention, and I'm doing something creative, and it's an adventure.
And when we met, Mary, we started writing songs
immediately.
Straight away. There was never too much.
But that was just spontaneous kind of thing. It wasn't planned out. And I see that in a lot of bands that were together back then, and now too. But it's like you didn't have there was all this stuff was brand new. These are new styles that happened. Like you had the rock and roll of the 60s, but like what kind of came out of the 70s, late 70s and into the 80s was a really kind of a new form.
Definitely.
And so it's kind of powerful to think we lived during that.
Yeah.
Even powerful, like you didn't have to be in a band. If you're listening to groups, you were part of the scene. You know, that's just the way it is. And it came from a place that sometimes you forget. It's easier to forget because
what I like about that world,
to think about
what I like about that world too is if you were a group and you had a following, you could. It didn't matter where you played. Your people would come and see you.
Totally.
Whereas now people have loyalty to a venue. And if a group that plays in
common.
Allentown plays, up in Black Rock,
their people aren't there. Yeah.
Oh man, that's a road trip.
I think that what I'm talking about is something that everybody goes through. It doesn't matter about here now or whatever. It's the human spirit that it's in a different form now, but that excitement is still there with people creating now.
There's no question. There's no question.
It's still there. Right. It's just different aspects, and some of it is that we're dealing with this new thing called technology, and that we have a relationship with it.
Yeah.
It's a new thing called technology.
Yeah, sorry, John, it's new.
New strain of technology.
Yeah, new strain.
Yeah. Mary, I like how you described, coming to Buffalo, and I moved here. I went to Fredonia and then moved here, but coming from Albany.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time, at Fredonia, I met people from Buffalo. I'm like, people are all musicians. I just joined a band there, like the second day I was there.
Yeah.
And it was Fredonia.
It was Fredonia.
Yeah.
And then I came to Buffalo, like friends took me here that still lived here, when they weren't at school. They went to the Continental.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God, this exists. I just felt like I found my tribe. Like, you are encouraged here. At least it felt that way, in wide-eyed way.
Yeah, there are a lot.
You're encouraged to be yourself, though, and to tap into those strains of creativity. And nobody thought you were weird for doing so.
There were goth people. There's the goth, and you got the Smiths, kind of identifying with that band, and then there were punks, the punk, and then.
And it all got lumped in under, bands doing original music.
Exactly. That was the thing. I'm like,
and
wow.
That was the thing. And
you can play our music and people come.
Yeah.
This is great.
And I grew up, I started playing, like in 1974, and playing in bars and stuff. And just you did not do original songs in bars. You didn't do it. It's like, you go to these places like Great Lakes Booking,
that's exactly. Yeah.
They give you the list.
The booking agencies in those days.
Oh, this is who you can play?
Yeah.
These are
and they would basically control the bigger suburban clubs. And if you signed up with them, they would get you the gigs, but they'd pull you aside and go, well, the crowd wants a little bit more Bob Seger or a little bit more Aerosmith or whatever, it was. And the more of that you played, the more you worked gig in the burbs. Yeah. Whereas in the city of Buffalo, it was different. You know what I mean? If you stood up in the Continental and did, like
Seeger,
Walk This Way.
Walk This Way.
That'd be like it. If I could walk that way, I would need the talcum powder.
But I'm bummed. Jerry should have done.
All right.
Okay.
And so you had all these like different stylistic things, rockabilly or goth or anything, but they were all, the unifying thread was original music.
Yeah.
It was because it was all different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
never
outside
wanted
of
to
the
join
mainstream.
one group, one clique or anything. Like you were saying, I just liked a little bit of all of it.
Yeah.
And it was all here.
Yeah, and there were venues. Well, of course, there was Nietzsche's. People played, and
the cabaret back
cabaret,
then. Yeah.
And then there were bands from Canada coming through.
Yeah.
That's the other thing, living on a border. Border town.
That affected us too, I think. Listen to CFNY
Canadian,
here. I mean, for sure.
They also had a tribute the other night, although they didn't advertise it very well, but it was a tribute to McVan's.
Was that of the cave or
of the Sportsman?
Sportsman.
But they had it billed as the Black Rock Historical Society presents. And then it said like a tribute to,
Are they still trying to put up a plaque?
It's up, isn't it?
It is up, yeah.
It is up? Oh, I gotta go.
But anyways, people were talking about that. But that was one of the first venues that really was a little different.
McVan's?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, didn't the Ramones play there in their formative years?
Well, the Dead Boys.
The Dead Boys. I know a lot of this
the
from
Ramones played there
meeting Terry Sullivan and playing with him. It happened a lot before I was here. But the stories were incredible to me of what that scene was like.
Yeah.
Yeah. I only been in that place a few times during that scene, but that was the first bar I'd ever been in and played in when I was 15.
Wow.
And that was with a cover band doing Led Zeppelin and Free and Tall and all that stuff. That was a bar band scene there for years and years. And
a rough crowd.
And a rough
crowd.
Yeah.
People were talking about when the Enemies used to play there and brawls would break out. Joe Bomzak, the late great, would leave the stage, go out, knock a couple guys' heads together.
I believe it.
And then go back up and finish his solo,
Wow.
He was the enforcer / lead guitarist.
Well, now you've got Jane's Addiction doing it to each other on stage.
Oh, that was sad.
I know.
Oh, come on. They got together for the money and they hate each other. That's why that happened.
Also, I don't know.
And they got more publicity.
Yeah. So they're going to go
but
do it again.
It does look very like a sad situation. It was a sad situation.
Well,
to me, because of that, when that band first emerged, they really mattered to me.
Yeah.
I thought that they meant something, but
some
things, I guess, are the negative side of nostalgia. I don't know.
Unique. But there's another aspect that when you guys were talking, there's music that is more athleticism.
Yeah.
You have bands that were playing, as Jerry knows, playing the drums is very physical.
Yeah.
It's pretty physical up there, but there's some that were really physical, and also vocally, they're younger guys would be singing, and women too, but you're doing these gymnastics with your voice that maybe you can do when you're younger, but as you age,
much harder.
It's very harder because it's much harder. Yeah, it's much harder.
Especially for people who weren't ever singing correctly, it catches up with you.
Technique's wrong, but also
That's right.
The exposure to volume for so long. I think what happened was that, if we use the example of Jane's Addiction, is that the lead singer could not continue singing the style he was, and it was too loud. Plus, he had hearing.
He said he couldn't hear even how to sing.
Hearing damage. So it becomes.
That's because they're a heavy rock band.
We've switched to in-ear monitors on our station. It's made life a little bit easier. It takes an adjustment. But I remember in the early days when we would travel around to smaller clubs, many of the sound men and sound women would remark to us that they enjoyed mixing us because we had the quietest.
Your stage volume is reasonable, right?
Of anybody. And, the minute you see the equipment that is being loaded into the club, if you're in for a long night.
Yeah. You see when you see a drummer's monitor setup, like.
It's basically the size of a large PA for his monitors.
My second band that I ever had, I went out and got an SVT I couldn't even move like an Ampeg SVT.
Yeah.
it was an
It's the size of a refrigerator.
It's the size of a casket.
Not an STD.
Yeah.
It's the size of
And
a
the head
casket.
weighs what? 250
Totally
pounds?
ridiculous.
Yeah.
Boy, do they sound
I've
great,
carried
but
those.
you don't need those in a club.
No.
Right.
And if you do, you only need one.
Yeah.
I remember seeing John Entwistle
That's what
at the Trough, and he had like 6 of them. 3 and 3 on top.
I think I suffered hearing loss that night. It was too much.
It was too much. And he was deaf anyway.
Yeah.
But that's where,
and Townsend's
where it
deaf, too.
comes like when you get a bunch of instruments together and you produce a lot of sound, that's very powerful. It's a weapon. Like when I see drum corps that are playing all together, it's just, and it gets into this like primal part of yourself, of course. But what's happened again is that our bodies can only take so much, and that what we've created with these sound systems and what we think the audience wants in terms of volume is the audience will have different feelings about what they want.
Right.
You can't just go and, I'm going to turn it down. You're getting that same volume. And I think the wear and tear from this is as definitely, you can see the results now in the older people who are in the scene.
Well, people lose sight of the fact that it's a music club and not just a volume club, where some groups, the louder the better, and that's not really true. I've got a decibel meter in my phone, and there are certain groups I see that are like
we've had this
peaking
chat
at
before,
110,
Jim.
peaking at 110, which creates ear damage.
Definitely.
Well, that was at the
irreparable
football game.
I can't help thinking that there's going to be, a whole generation of people who listen to nothing but
loud, super compressed sound through
like
earbuds.
The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, with a picture on the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where the ears are really little, the eyes are big, and the thumb is big. And it's like, that's what we're going to become, because we are always
the way we're going to evolve.
Yes.
Well, every
becoming science fiction.
Every time I go to a club and put in my earplugs, which I do a lot more and more now, I think to myself, isn't this like going to an art gallery and putting on a blindfold? I mean, I'm here to use my eyes to enjoy, and I'm here to use my ears, not to protect my ears so that I'm getting a muffled version of something that is supposed to be music. I'm supposed to be listening to the beauty of it.
There is certain, music that lends itself to that. But
I agree.
But then there's always the threshold,
I suppose so. And you should be able to make that decision for yourself. Like, I'm going to the show and I know what it's going to be, and not arrive and be like, that would have been wonderful, but
I would have loved to have seen Social D, but I'm sure that's Marshalls, and that's
but it is what it is.
SVTs,
you know what you're getting.
Man.
Yeah. I don't know how we got there, but it's interesting anyway.
Part of the journey.
I wanted to kind of wrap up by making a comment and getting your guys' take on it. It seems to me that at the core of all this is some really enduring and abiding friendships that cross a lot of ground and time and changes. And I have the idea that when people are seeing you live, in 2024, that whether they are consciously acknowledging that or not, they're aware of that. You can tell when you're witnessing something, because you're like, these people are together because they love each other and they love and respect each other and what they create together. And you can't really fake that. Is that true? You can tell me. Well, actually, we don't really like each other, but we feel bad for John, so we play with him. Any thoughts on that?
They're my friends.
There's ups and downs.
Of course, in any relationship,
but there's
especially
mutual
enduring
respect.
ones.
There's mutual respect, and that's the most important thing. I see so many bands that is like fronted by a person who basically hires 4 people to back him, and this person will generally write every song, sing every song, sort of, and the whole group is from that person's point of view.
Yeah.
Where we've never really had that, even when we had a very dominant singers at times, or Rob or something like that. There was always a sense of, it's corny to say, but the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And I think that works really for a lot of bands.
Yeah. There's a philosophy too, like with the arts. I think of Balanchine, something like, why do you dance? Because I must. It's like, this is a world that we get to enter.
Yeah.
And it's a privilege.
Yeah.
Even though you sometimes just can't, we can obviously say that we've had times when we don't always like each other that much. And, we're like family, we can make fun of each other, but we also are there for each other whenever something happens. And we know we've had this collective experience together. And that what I feel is like to be able to have the chance, because I am like music is me, I'm music, kind of thing. Like I can't imagine not doing it. Like I hear music in pitches, like I'll hear my seatbelt thing going off and it's a G sharp.
Always.
That kind of thing. So to be able to do it and perform, and we have this formula, like we click together and then it becomes something, it levitates.
You sure it's a G sharp and not an A minor?
It's like between a G sharp and an A.
A flat,
It's like, it's not even in the Western note system.
It's a microtone.
But it's like, it's something, there's so many different levels to think about it. And there are times when, for me, I stopped playing with the group because something wasn't working right with me. And I had to figure out what that was. And I think we all go through that.
Yeah.
Because especially I had more of a challenge in some ways, because when I initially got involved with this group, it was after I had done music with John. We had our duo, John and Mary, and that was really wonderful doing that and writing our own songs. We had our own identity that way. And then to suddenly be pushed into a situation, I voluntarily did it, but I didn't know what I was getting into exactly.
You never know, right? No. Until you're in it.
And then you think, oh, this is kind of strange having these, like, I can sing this, I can do this stuff, but being identified and compared to somebody who's an icon, like Natalie Merchant. And so that was always a hard part, but now it's gotten to the place where I love the songs. I love doing other songs that we've written. I love just being able to open my mouth and make a sound, and that people want to hear it. It always surprises me. I don't feel surprised by my viola playing, my string playing, because that comes from a different place.
Right.
It's like, for me, it's almost like untouchable. I don't even know how to describe it, but I feel like critically, I think that when you're a singer, you get more of the criticism because you're presenting yourself.
Yeah.
So it's very personal and
in a way, the most vulnerable.
Yes,
spot.
It is very vulnerable. So, but on that note, I'm happy to do it.
Yeah.
No, I'm. These people are my family. With all the requisite foibles and things.
With everything that word means, right?
I mean, it's 40 years. 41 for me, and I can't think of anybody. There's maybe one or two people that I've had any kind of ongoing relationship
for that long,
for that length of time. Really, outside of my own flesh and blood siblings, who I don't think I see them as much as I do
the band.
These guys.
I haven't seen my brother in 7 years.
Yeah,
and I see you guys all the time.
That's it.
And not only that, but as we're getting older and stuff, our lives take on different meanings, with different people's health, different, we've had 2 people die in our group, 2 members have died, and, you can just stop, or you can just regroup and just, soldier on.
Well, no, the point too is that the people we've worked with that helped this get off the ground, the people who have booked us, the people who have had faith in us, and most importantly, the people who attend the shows.
Yeah.
We can't do any of it unless people come to the shows. no matter how good you are, there's so many special performers and people who are great, but for whatever reason, they, it just doesn't work that well. The audiences aren't there, and this is a lucky situation.
We've been working on a new album too.
That's great news.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit, or is that just?
Well, we've been at it a long time, but we started it just before the COVID lockdown.
Yeah.
So we lost like a year, and then there was some illness in the group, or at least we kind of took some time off. So
that
in other
would
words,
be me.
Yeah. So in other words, when you say we've been working on it for 3.5 years, we haven't spent any more actual time in the studio, but it's coming together. And I think we have about 8. I think we got about 8 songs mixed, and we maybe got about another 6.
Terribly sorry.
That's all right.
So, is there a schedule for that at all? Or?
Yeah, we're picking away. Yeah, we're hoping to have it done maybe by Thanksgiving, I think. Although,
that's okay.
Was that the motif from Joni Mitchell doing Jingle Bells?
Actually, it did sound like that, didn't it?
Kind of melancholy. That's what it sounds
I
like.
love Joni.
Yeah.
I used to.
Well, it's and we have people like Joe Rosser with us now doing background vocals on the road, which is wonderful. And he has worked with us, and we work with Armin Petrie too, who's worked with.
Armin's done a great job. Yeah. He's really patient with us.
He's worked with a lot of people.
Oh, he's amazing. Dolls
and we've had a couple. We have a couple guests on the record. The 2 folks from Sixpence None the Richer, Lee Nash and
Matt Slocum.
Yeah,
and they play on the record, and it's interesting.
Is Joe involved in the recording? Will he be on the recording?
He's on the you're singing
wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
He's a rare musician.
We're not necessarily thinking in terms of, well, will we be able to reproduce this?
Right.
I mean, in the old days, an album was an album.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Oh, I definitely do.
You know that, right? And you just
its own art form.
Yeah, and it was just you and how you reacted to it, and
had the headphones that you could hear the.
Oh, yeah.
Can you
listen to that panning? Oh
yeah! Whoa!
I still do it.
Yes,
still do
I
it.
know.
What's the first record to ever have the lyrics printed on it?
All right, hold on.
Alex Trebek. What's the answer?
Yeah. I'm thinking, I'm only seeing liner notes printed, and those were on tons of jazz.
The actual record has the
has all the lyrics.
Like going around in a circle?
I want to say
Sergeant Pepper.
On the inner sleeve.
Oh, inner sleeve. Okay.
What'd you say, Jay?
Sergeant Pepper.
Sergeant Pepper. Yeah.
That's right, on the back.
Yeah. It's the first album to ever. So suddenly then it changed your experience a little bit.
Definitely.
Because instead of just staring at the imagery and looking at who, wrote the songs and stuff, suddenly you were involved in it.
Following along
lyrics.
And I always used to make a deal with myself.
My life doing it.
I would never look at the lyrics until I'd listened to the record about 3 or 4 times. And then you'd see the lyrics and it'd go, wow.
Oh, is that what he said?
Yeah.
But I never liked to just listen to it the first time.
It creates an even deeper immersive experience, I always felt.
Yeah.
The way language and melody and work together that's the magic, right?
It's like watching Train Spotting without the subtitles.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Well, I appreciate you guys very much taking the time to.
Oh, it's our pleasure.
Thank you, Jeff.
And I look forward to new music so much, and I'm looking forward to the October 19th UB Center for the Arts gig, and then you're heading out west.
Well, we got 3 more shows in the New England area. Yeah. So we're doing 4 here in the East, and then we're going out to California for 4.
Excellent. And then new music. I really look forward to it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys for being here.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
See you at the show.
Thanks for having us. And just remember, as long as there are people that want to come see us and hear us, man, we'll do it.
I love that.
Keep doing it.